Hi everybody, I'm Chris Shepherd and welcome to Temple Field. It's a favourite location of mine, and today we're going to use it to try out the Olympus versus the Canon for landscape photography. The plan today is to compare these two cameras as closely as possible. So I'll try to select equivalent focal lengths, both using their native ISOs. And then we're going to take pictures 50 megapixel RAW on the Canon 5DS, 20 megapixel RAW on the Olympus, plus the 40 megapixel high resolution mode. I'll show you how we take the pictures, then we're going to have a look at them in Lightroom and see how it comes out. These are the settings I'm using on the 5DS, f8, ISO 100 with a 2-second delay to match up to that on the Olympus. On the Olympus we're going for a high-res shot, so it should in theory give us 40 megapixels, which should be equivalent to or close to the 50 megapixels of the 5DS. Here we are in Lightroom looking at the results from the shoot. What we have here is the Canon RAW, the Olympus RAW, and then the JPEGs, the 40 megapixel Olympus and 20 megapixel JPEG. Let's look at the RAWs first. First thing I noticed is that the Canon is a bit warmer than the Olympus, and the Olympus really, the Olympus JPEGs are closest to the actual colours that I saw in the field when I was there. So maybe it's a bit warmer in Canon land, but I have noticed my 5DS does have a tendency to, on auto white balance, go off a bit. But it's RAW, so it doesn't matter too much. So let's have a look down here, flicking between the two. So that's 20 megapixels, 50 megapixels, and let's look down here at 1:1. So this is what 50 megapixels gives you. Same area on the 20 megapixel shot. So I don't know, not as much extra detail as you'd possibly think, to be fair. There's a little bit of detail on those leaves there. It's a bit further away, it's harder to see. You can make a bigger print from the 50 megapixel, obviously, but you know, is it in realistic terms, it's going to make that much difference? Certainly 20 megapixel pictures are fine for me. I can print A3 from them, no trouble at all. Take a look at the tree for the same thing. Again, that's 20 megapixels. 50, 20. So I don't know. Extra megapixels are nice to have. Given the choice, I'll go for the 50 megapixel. Apart from, one of the things that hit me big time when I started using the 50 megapixel camera is you need a really powerful computer. Lugging those huge files about is a job for a high power computer that has a lot of memory, a fast disk. I only work off SSD because it's faster. I mean, if you're previewing your files, every file is 51 megabytes. That's a huge files to start processing and drawing previews from. But let's take a look at the 40 megapixel Olympus versus the 50 megapixel Canon. So let's filter those out. And so this is your 50 megapixel Canon, and this is your 40 megapixel Olympus, and then that's 20 megapixels for comparison. So the difference between 40 and 50 megapixels is not a lot, hardly anything really. Now what we are comparing here is a JPEG compared to a RAW. So the Canon RAW file hasn't got much sharpening on it, so nip in the development here and add a little bit of sharpening to it, a bit of details, lift the shadows a little bit, yeah. So you can see a bit more detail on that tree. So we get, come on, stay still, where are we going? So that's 40 megapixels, and when that finally loads, because we applied the sharpening, that's your 50 megapixels. So unless you're absolutely pixel peaking and printing at massive sizes, I don't think 50 megapixels over the 40 megapixel Olympus is going to give you a lot of benefit. Having said that, the 50 megapixel Canon is a lot easier to work with than using the high-res mode. The high-res mode, these are the second time I did these shots, because first time it was just really difficult to try and get them to work properly. You have to ideally make sure the camera is really stable and work on an environment where hardly anything is moving, because as soon as you start getting movement it doesn't work at all. So realistically for me, I'd only ever use the 40 megapixel mode in the studio with a still life object. So it's, I think although it's a nice to have, it's kind of quite limited, and I personally probably wouldn't bother with the 40 megapixel mode for landscapes. I can't see there are many times when I would need it, and for the extra effort involved with using the shoot, because you just get a JPEG, and it's got to be really still. So I haven't tried it on any running water or anything like that. That might be an interesting thing to try, but I don't know. To me, it seems a little gimmicky, but not something you in practice that most photographers would actually use. So for me, the actual change we are looking at really is whether 20 megapixel is good enough compared to 50. That's something you have to work out for yourself, because 20 megapixel for me is certainly resolving enough detail in a field like this. I could easily make a print from this. A3 plus, A2, certainly made prints from 20 megapixels of A2 with no issues at all, especially if you're using a good rip. It will add all that extra detail in for you. You get extra megapixels with the Canon, but it's not quite as much of a difference as you'd think. You know, that's basically how much more information you get, and you're going from there to there, which is okay, but it's not earth-shattering. You're not suddenly getting huge amounts of detail that you can do stuff with. So my theory is that the 20 megapixel Olympus is perfectly adequate for my needs. 50 megapixels is nice. I don't knock it, but if I was choosing based on this, I don't think it would have an effect on my choice. I'd be happy to use the 20 megapixel Canon, 20 megapixel Olympus, because of the size and everything else, and the speed of processing images as well. It's so much, in a way, nicer to use than the Canon 50 megapixels. So hopefully you found that of use. If you do, please subscribe to my channel, because I'm sure I can come up with some more videos for you trying out these two cameras against each other. Thanks very much. I'm going to leave you with a few pictures I've taken of this location over the years, because like I say, I've visited it many times, and it's right near on my doorstep, and so I've interpreted this scene in many different occasions. Thank you.